playing with power, superpower.
Hello, welcome! The SNES Mini Classic is upon us, gaming's worst kept secret considering demand for the NES Mini. Everyone knew this was coming and it's amazing. This micro edition of a third generation's best selling and most beloved console, but with an extremely high quality game line it's been an absolute pleasure to play through. There's less filler and more variety than the NES Mini's offering, including the never before released Starfox 2, so amongst the Zeldas, Marios and Metroids of this world, and also a brand new SNES game to play in 2017, which is just lovely. Check out Gaming Jay's playthrough here or in the link. Jay's on a quest to play everything in the 1001 games to play before you die book, so check out and subscribe to his cool channel. And without further ado, we're going to blast through the PAL lineup in alphabetical order, which means Contra 3 The Alien Wars is first up. Let's do this! We've got high energy arcade mayhem to get the ball rolling in. Contra 3 is basically the previous NES game on steroids, yet a fine showpiece for the fledgling console's power. The graphics are much closer to the arcade editions, levels are more complex with new monkey bar bits, motorbike chases, missile rides, and even some top-down mode 7 sections. Thankfully the great core gameplay is still the same, except you've now got a spin attack, you can carry 2 weapons, but if you think out negate the series' trademark difficulty, you're very wrong, man. Only the strong will survive the Alien Wars, or those that use the Mini's built-in save and rewind features. However you approach it, Contra 3 offers first-rate run and gun action, and is a good one to pick up and play any time. It's a blast 1 or 2 player, one of several sequels or super editions of games from the NES Mini, so there's a nice continuity between the two little fellas. Speaking of duos, this too's some NX flaunting their fancy 3D bodies in Rare's bestseller Donkey Kong Country, released in 1995. It's the first Donkey Kong title developed without Shigeru Miyamoto as either director or producer, and a game I've developed mixed feelings for over the years. So I found beneath the graphical glitz lies a pretty plain platformer. It's good in parts, but nothing special. It's a long way from the game I thought it was 20 odd years ago, recording the music to cassette. All the levels feel very similar, whether that's jungle, snow or cave, and you find yourself in the same situations time and again. A wheel with spikes replacing a wasp, for example, in situations like this. Or the admittedly fun barrel sections becoming snow-covered versions later on. The water levels are right as far as wall levels go, and the rollercoaster minecart bits get the balance of tension, reflexes and frustration just right. So overall, it's an above average platformer, even if it was grossly overrated on release due to the groundbreaking visuals, which did keep the Super Nintendo relevant I might add long after its sell-by date, which is to this game and Rare's credit also. Oh, I'll always remember seeing Killer Instinct in the arcade for the first time. Oh man, so to achieve pre-rendered 3D graphics in what was yesterday's hardware in 1995 was an amazing achievement. Miyamoto himself was not a fan of the 3D look however, and his remarkable retort, released later the same year, features further on in this video. Thank you, Carl. Let's move on to cult hipster favourite Earthbound, the first of several legendary RPGs in this collection. Never released in Britain at the time, although I've been aware of it since I was about 10 years old, so it's really cool to finally see what the fuss is about, and it's very nice indeed. The game brings traditional RPG elements and locations such as villages, caves, dungeons, into a quirky modern United States, setting it apart from contemporary role players. You'll replenish your stats with drugstores and burger bars, you'll call your parents to save your game, and your dad sends you money to ATMs for your gear. You'll fight street gangs with baseball bats and psychic powers 1 minute and creatures under the control of an alien power the next. It's mad, with a dreamlike quality. The similarity to Pokemon striking at times, but when you realise both games are made by much of the same people, then it makes a lot of sense. The story is involving from the start in large part to the celebrated localisation work of Marcus Lindblom. He was given license to make a translation in an already crazy game, as weird as he wanted, and it's a Japanese outside view of the US to begin with, so the result is genuinely brilliant and very funny, if only more Japanese games had been localised to this standard. Poor sales suggested it was too weird to live at the time, but its enduring quality has made it too rare to die as the years have worn on. It's certainly unlike any RPG I've played before. And if you want something more traditional but no less excellent from your role-playing, look no further than Final Fantasy VI, known as 3 in the US. Join a group of rebels, save the world from an evil empire in a fantasy epic that's still considered one of the best games ever 23 years after release. My expectation levels were inflated as a result, but after a few hours I could see all the makings of a masterwork. There's very high production values in the presentation and writing, there's a cinematic quality to what unfolds, typically deep square RPG mechanics, memorable characters, delightful graphics, whether that's in towns, combat or this snazzy Mode 7 overworld. Also, the fantasy setting mixed with varying stages of industrial technology is really interesting, despite not usually being a fan of that mix. You know, I likes my fantasy, I likes my robots separate, man. But regardless, Final Fantasy VI is one of several games that sucked me in, and my intention was to continue through this collection. I've not been as hooked by a traditional RPG since Golden Sun, so I intend to return to it ASAP. And I was straight onto the grid for F-Zero when I could wrench myself away. One of 2 launch titles in this collection and my earliest Super Nintendo memory. I just remember seeing its eye-popping colour, the music and the Mode 7 mashed my mind like the adverts promised. It was a complete contrast to the mean and moody Mega Drive I knew at the time. And such a huge jump as well on a technical level from the NES, but it's now harder and slower than I remember, even when boosting like a maniac, so the thrill's missing these days, but I'm sure, yeah, that's due to me playing F-Zero X recently, which continues to blast along at breakneck speeds. You know, again, unlike F-Zero X and other races, the computer cars noticeably don't compete against each other. They stay religiously in line, they turn corners in the same place, and it kind of makes you feel alone and your competitors like bollards, so it does show its age overall, but it still looks great. Teams like Big Blue still bang, and its legacy and charting a path for games such as Wipeout can't be denied. A round of golf's next with Kirby's Dream Course, just perfect if you're tired of all the exciting platforming RPG and adventuring available in this collection. To be fair, it does try hard to charm with its wacky courses of increasing difficulty, and the satisfaction to be had when your shot is just right. There is also the depth of a serious golf game, so you can whack, chip and slice Kirby as the need arises, using special abilities as they unlock. Guess if you're a Kirby fan, you'll appreciate how the Kirby world's been adapted to something different, but I've got better things to do like play Mega Man X. But oh, there's another pink pleb game first, Kirby Superstar, a platformer released ludicrously late in the console's life cycle, just like Kirby's Adventure on the NES, March 1996 to be precise. Yep, that's 2 months before Mario 64. You know, it's not a game you'd crack out if you're looking to dispel the notion Nintendo was for kids to a Sega or PlayStation friend, that's for sure. It's ridiculously twee with too much going on both visually and orally. Hurts my eyes, man. It can only be recommended in small doses, and after an hour of Mortal Kombat. And if this game is more suited to children, then take a look at this sinister message at the start of one level. No pressure, little Jimmy. Here he is, Mr. X, the first 16-bit Mega Man and a spin-off from the main numbered series, and actually a successful and necessary reinvention of a franchise that was starting to feel a bit stale by 5 or 6 on the NES. The gameplay's been expanded carefully while protecting the essence of what made the early ones so good. I mean, I love Mega Man 2. It's like a fresh start for a new generation, basically. You can now jump and slide on walls, and there's loads of hidden upgrades around the levels that grant you abilities like increasing your power, defense, energy. And these are separate from the familiar choose a level beat the boss gain a new weapon routine, so Mega Man's deeper than ever before, and it was already uncommonly so for an action platformer. Some people say the difficulty level's too low, but while it's without a doubt more forgiving than the older ones, I don't consider a move from the brutal NES difficulty levels a bad thing, you know. All in all, X is great fun and a return to form for Mr. Man. Mr. M. Man, Secret of Mana. Another offering from the RPG god Square, and one close to my heart as the first in the genre I played properly. I'm so pleased to find it's aged wonderfully and is just as captivating over 20 years later, thanks in large part to how the stirring soundtrack immerses you in its beautiful high fantasy world without realising. Another assessed for far longer than intended. Mana offers something different again from Final Fantasy VI and Earthbound, as combat's in real time with no random encounters, and the famous ring command system wouldn't look out of place in a modern title. Both features mesh together perfectly as the ring lets you pause, meaning that RPG ebb and flow remains even in the heat of battle. It's absolutely superb. You can even set the AI behaviour of your companions through a range of defensive and attacking options, and switch between them at will, which adds even more depth to your adventuring. They do get stuck sometimes, but that's easily overlooked when the game's so good. The equipment and magic system's equally broad and intuitive thanks to the ring work, and you'll be turning enemies into snowmen and polishing them off with acid rain in no time. But be prepared to put work into your skills and the way you're set up, or you will get smashed about. As I got to this bloody giant that destroyed me over and over after cruising up to that point, and my only choice was to backtrack and grind, but that's often the nature of 90s RPGs, of course. It just makes the post-victory fist pump all the more satisfying. Secret of Mana is the third RPG available in this collection of the highest calibre, all offering delightful but distinct experiences, so take your pick. Into space now with Starfox, and well, it may look primitive and frankly horrifying now, but damn, this was something else in the early 90s. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, because polygons had come from the arcade and up into my house, thanks to the Super FX chip. Big moment. It was a genuine thrill as sirens blared, scrambling to combat, blasting enemies, barrel rolling and bantering with often an ungrateful crew. There's still fun to be had now once your eyes reacclimatise to the visuals. You'll find plenty of tense shootouts and Star Wars-esque moments with multiple paths through the game, bringing an unusual amount of replay value to the world of on-rail shooting. Crew interactions build a sense of rapport as the plot progresses, despite the disappearance during boss fights to bloody bastards, where a bit of bomb spam compensates for their absence nicely. Let's turn the polygon count up to 11 now and look at the highly anticipated, never before released Starfox 2, which builds on the original by throwing real-time strategy into the mix. So instead of simply flying your R-Wing through linear levels, the objective is to beat all threats to your homeworld, such as ballistic missiles, battleships and fighter squadrons on the map as you see fit, all while defending Corneria from the planet cannon, which pummels your home from afar as war rages around the Lila system. The live map made me think of Mass Effect 2, and the sense of urgency adds a tiny sprinkling of XCOM into the equation. There's new characters and crafts, including this crazy tank hybrid thing that you can activate on the fly. However, the action never lasts more than a few minutes in each section before you're jolted back to the map. There's a kind of fragmented feel to proceedings that the original doesn't have. It makes your tactical choices feel more like mini-games as opposed to fully fleshed out options. It's certainly an ambitious sequel then, if disjointed and in need of some polish basically. Nintendo binned it of course, which is understandable as it wouldn't have compared favourably to the new 32-bit consoles, and been a PR disaster most likely for the N64 if it was ported to go up against them. So I think Star Fox 2 just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time really. A shame, but very nice to finally play a title consigned long ago to history. And the same cannot be said for the next title, a true phenomenon, Street Fighter 2. Wow, the Turbo version was chosen for this collection, which is the one before the new challenges, Super Street Fighter 2, and after the original World Warrior and Champion editions. Street Fighter gets confusing, and that's before you consider the Alpha series' countless crossovers and 3D editions. You can't go wrong with Turbo though, you turn that speed up and make your Honda feel like Vega on stimulants. It always amazes me how good the animation is and at one point it continues to feel whenever I return to any edition of Street Fighter 2. It's been revised again most recently on Switch, which is testament to its quality and monumental impact on fighting and games as a whole. Street Fighter 2 is responsible for combos, it popularised direct two-player confrontations, paving the way for the multiplayer and deathmatches of today. It rejuvenated the arcade, which had been stale since the early 80s, while at the same time driving Super Nintendo sales at home. Another introduced concept is the idea of revisions or expanding the current game instead of releasing a sequel, and that can be seen in the patches or DLC of modern games. Few games endear in popular culture generally the way Street Fighter 2 does, so I think a more ludicrous legacy is difficult, if not impossible, to find. Into the Super titles now, starting with Super Castlevania, which is Castlevania 4. I enjoyed the NES one a lot, so I was really looking forward to it. I found it really underwhelming to begin with at first, but once I found you can now swing your trademark whip in 8 directions and go limp to block projectiles and swing from hooks, I got into it. You can also move while crouching now, which is also handy, and all these additions definitely make it more forgiving and less stiff feeling than the first one, but strange, there's a certain vibe missing that the original had. I can't put my finger on it really what it is, but it might be the music, which is suitably rich and atmospheric, but it just isn't as memorable to me as the original somehow. The levels are diverse, and as before, there's plenty of cool set pieces, enemies, the bosses in particular are a highlight, and I found myself looking forward to the end of each level to see what the hell I was up against. There are clear improvements over the original, but that's the obvious graphical ones are in the mechanics, which means it's a good game, and it's nice to see the series return to its action platforming roots after a move to role-playing and exploration in 2 and 3. Up next is a more archaic action platformer, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, the third in the series known to its frankly absurd difficulty. It would be frustrating if it wasn't just so funny, you've got to applaud its barbarity. I couldn't even finish the first level, and I can't remember the last time I didn't manage that. Oh wait, I can, it was the previous NES one. Released less than a year after Super Nintendo's launch, Ghouls and Ghosts feels like it belongs to the previous generation. While most games have left that 8-bit difficulty behind, this one's keeping it real, giving you 2 hits to navigate lengthy levels with relentless enemies coming at you from all angles. You don't have a second to rest. And like before, you're punished with a death, it's going back to the start. And get this as well, you've got to complete it twice in a row to fight the end boss and enjoy the true ending. This is actually the furthest I've got, I was like, right, come on, nearly there. Game goes, nah mate, it's mental. If you ever say the masochistic streak, Ghouls and Ghosts is for you. It'll pour candle wax on your gaping bumhole and stomp your balls over and over again. Next up is the go-to multiplayer game along with Contra and Street Fighter 2 of course, Super Mario Kart, the father of all kart racing games and amongst Mario's most successful forays outside his platforming bread and butter. If only it could have been played 4-player like 64 onwards, It's great memories playing with friends on that one. And it's great to see the originals age quite nicely. Driving your kart's a pleasure, especially at higher CCs. At 150, racing suitably frantic and tense. Using the well-implemented items is as satisfying and as evil as ever, especially in multiplayer. Collecting coins to increase your speed is a clever mechanic sorely missing from the sequel, and the graphics still pop despite the flatness of everything. It's a typically bright and colourful SNES game. For some reason, I don't remember the entire half of your screen being the map and a rear mirror. It takes a moment to get used to. I wonder why that was done. I suppose you can use it to fire your shells, bananas and stuff with more accuracy, but it seems a bit odd today. And like F-Zero, it's hard not to notice how the computer racers rarely overtake each other unless you do something to disrupt their pattern. But they do use items, including unique ones of their own, so it still feels more like a race thanks to the personality and traits of the characters. Also, it's less reliant on homing shells too than the sequels, and thankfully there isn't a blue shell in sight, and no rubber banding from what I can tell anyway. This means victory comes down to skill more often than not in spite of any item help, which means it's still the purest Mario Kart around and the best you could get until Sonic Drift came out. Only joking. Super Mario RPG is another one for him out of his comfort zone, and yet another from Square. It's actually quite poignant as it shows how close the two companies once were before their messy breakup. Nintendo placing their superstar mascot in the hands of another and just letting him get on with it. I feel bad about this, but my cup runneth over with wonderful RPGs already, and I was a bit burnt out by the time I got onto this, so I only spent a short time with it, but from what I saw, it's really good. It's really weird seeing Mario do his Mario shit in an RPG, and I have no doubt Square have done a good job with this thanks to their incredible skills. You know, it'd be like ID making a bad first-person shooter or something. The graphics are really nice too. It's released in 1996, so it's kind of straddling that line in the console continuum between 2 and 3D. It's really impressive. But it's now time to knock Mario out and return him home to his magnum opus, his pièce de résistance, Super Bloody Mario World. The best-selling and most iconic title on the system and the second launch game in this collection, Nintendo needed to do something big with its new machine to recover lost ground to the Mega Drive released almost 2 years before, and good god did Shigeru Miyamoto deliver. Super Mario World's a monster, gaming's most famous star in its element, taking platforming to new heights. The tightest gameplay you can find, splendid visuals, impeccably designed levels, with a wondrous variety that puts other platformers to shame. The bewitching game world brims with secrets, branching paths which lead to alternate exits, which in turn lead to secondary routes which can in turn reveal entirely new worlds. The tactile use of coin palaces is required to reach the game's most concealed areas. The new save system, checkpoints and ability to store an item in reserve removes the hardcore complete in one sitting requirement of Mario 3. The raccoon suit as well has been replaced with a cape, and while there are less quirky suit-type power-ups in the prequel, this is more than made up for by the debut of Yoshi. It was actually conceptualised during the NES days, but technology was unable to grant such a useful companion until now. I do believe the best 16-bit games occupy a sweet spot between generations which allow them to age better than any other. The leap between 8 and 16-bit is large enough to make NES games feel drab in comparison, while the polygons of early PlayStation look positively primitive today. Super Mario World is one of those games, possessing a timeless quality which guarantees its continued enjoyment by gamers of all ages. This is Nintendo giving pregnant Sega a gut punch before Sonic was even born. One of the best games ever made, without a doubt. Now the next title is another perennial masterpiece which holds a special place in my heart. A moment of silence please, let's cut the music. Super Metroid is a dazzling, potent cocktail of everything great about 16-bit gaming. The intrepid exploration of a Zelda, run-and-gun action of Contra, platforming, RPG elements, first-rate graphics and epic set pieces combined into something unforgettable. The National Film Registry reserves films deemed significant enough into the Library of Congress, and if an accepted video game equivalent allowed only one game per console, then this would be my Super Nintendo pick. I had the Strategy Guide edition as a kid, and this giant 24 megabit game in its beastly box was like nothing I'd ever played or seen. A feeling of menace still fills the air the moment you step onto the planet's surface, the game giving no indication of where to go or what to do. You're underpowered, unknowing and alone. And unlike modern stuff, the game trusts you to explore and figure things out for yourself, slowly gaining power and confidence as you delve deeper and ever closer to the famous showdown with Mother Brain. With headphones on, fantastic audio draws you in, making it as much an experience as a game. There's no other character's text or exposition to drive the story, so at times it feels like just you and the music, or your footsteps when it suddenly stops ominously. Incremental improvements over the prequel include a well-presented map, the ability to fire in 8 directions, and cool new items like the grapple beam. Everything's a joy to use anyway, from your iconic morph ball to the speed boot. There's also a ton of hidden moves you can discover by combining suit and weapon power-ups together. I've taken an interest in game development and design over recent years, the engine, audio, AI, production, and playing games with one eye on that aspect of things means you can appreciate unbelievably good design and pacing even more. By modern standard it's relatively short, 7 hours max will do you, but your journey is so dense it feels far longer in the best possible way. 7 hours of this supernova packs more entertainment in 70 hours of Assassin's Duty 25. Super Metroid's almost equally famous as speedrunning as much as its quality. The best thing you can do is pace yourself and savour every moment. And I'll tell you it's a heavy hitter just so I can link to Super Punch-Out, an enjoyably arcadey boxer which is the NES game pretty much with vastly improved graphics, which is all good as if it isn't broken don't fix it, and I love how simple the controls are despite there being a nice repertoire of attacking and defensive tactics to learn. To succeed you require good timing, reflexes plus the ability to recognise your rival's patterns so you can land those satisfying super punches which become available once your power meter fills. The boxers themselves are nice big well animated sprites, giving them loads of personality. I found myself seeking victory just to see what outlandish individual I'd face next, as much to progress through the different circuits, so it's another good one just to pick up and play with plenty of depth below the belt. Super Punch-Out reminds me I've always preferred fun interpretations of sports and racing to the real things. Give me this and Mario Kart over Fight Night and Gran Turismo any day. Now no SNES collection would be complete without Link to the Past, the most iconic game on a console was Super Mario World I'd say. After playing again for what must be the 5th or 6th time, I'm pleased to find Link's mind-bending quest between parallel worlds remains a captivating experience. The moment you leave a rain-lashed Hyrule Castle to begin your quest in earnest, that theme kicks in, you're confronted with a lovely looking world that's yours to explore, and there's so much going on from the start, a cracked wall here, a big rock there, making a mental note of all the places to return to once you've got the right item. Speaking of which, the Master Sword makes its debut in Link to the Past, as does the hookshot and Pegasus boots. The spin attack too, which means combat feels more fluid than the first, and it has aged though, but it doesn't provide the same buzz, the action as say Mana or Super Metroid anymore. I do notice how they're similar games in some ways, two adventures with an emphasis on exploration and beefing yourself up over time, but there's a much lighter, more familiar Nintendo tone to Hyrule, and a focus on mind-mashing puzzles as you seek to exploit intricate differences between the light and dark worlds to progress in your quest. Be ready to get stuck, and don't attack the chickens. I do love this game, but I enjoyed subsequent Zeldas like Oracle of Ages and Minish Cap just as much I'd say, and Link's Awakening even more I've come to realise. There was just something special about pulling a sickie from school and playing Zelda in bed. But to many, Link to the Past continues to be the finest Zelda in the series, one of the best games of all time, yet another title garnering top-notch acclaim in its collection. And when you see that Mario World, Metroid and Final Fantasy VI are thought of in the same way for their own respective series, then you realise you're dealing with a very special console. And we close with a platformer I alluded to during Donkey Kong Country. Finishing with a bang's an understatement, it's an absolute atomic bomb. Yoshi's Island, which is Super Mario World 2, it's a game I dismissed for like 20 years, not because I thought it'd be bad, it was all about the violence of early PlayStation stuff and Mortal Kombat by the time of release in the UK, so my attitude was like, ooh, it looks like a colouring book and Mario's a baby. Dismembered limbs and decapitations clouded in my mind. And ever since reading it was as good, if not superior to the original, even then I still went, nah, can't be it. Until now, Yoshi's Island is a sensation with unbelievable visuals and special effects never before seen in a platformer. It's a feast for the eyes, yeah, and Yoshi himself boasts a ton of innovations, most important being a clever egg firing mechanic, which is great fun to use and experiment with. The gameplay is just so well judged, yeah, everything's coming together with such skill. Another is how Baby Mario functions as your health meter. The countdown begins when you hit, retrieve him or you'll lose a life. The shades of modern games regenerating health there, which is interesting. What's amazing is how innovation's been brought to a saturated genre, which is no longer the future in 1995, another amazing achievement all around by Shigeru Miyamoto, and my favourite game I played this year, for the sheer pleasure of discovering something so fresh that surprised me so much, and that may rival the original by the time I finished, a task I considered impossible. Exciting times. And it's fitting how both games exist on either end of the Super Nintendo's history, the original announcing arrival in stunning fashion, and then a sequel that pushes the hardware to its very limits, as the sun sets on a golden age. And that is it. Thank you for watching. It's been quite a journey playing through these, an absolute pleasure, a feast for nostalgia with some nice surprises along the way. This video would have been out far sooner if the games weren't so damn good. Perhaps if it was a Mega Drive collection it might have come out weeks ago, ho ho! Let me know what your favourites are and what you think's missing. Chrono Trigger and Pilot Wings are the obvious ones for me. These are the two main playlists on my channel, check them out and the rest of my shit for the others. And if you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. You can also follow me on Twitter. I've not played a modern game for over a month because of this collection, so if you'll excuse me, I'm off to play the shallowest, most graphically demanding game I can find. Bye bye!